Robin, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much. So can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm going to very briefly tell the story about when we were testing this, Teri and I, yesterday, and my camera didn't seem to be working because he could just see a black square. And it took us about 45 minutes to discover that I just didn't have any lights on because I'm completely blind. So I was in a pitch black room, and I just, it was like the camera was broken. So anyway, that is the pitfalls of accessibility. Even when the technology is working, sometimes there are still, obstacles in our way. But luckily, he had that brilliant idea, and I switched on the light, and I've made sure I've got it on now. So hopefully
we can all see you. So thank you, Robert. That is a funny story, but we got
it. So yeah, talking about the power of technology. So very, very briefly, I work for a technology and disability charity here in the UK called AbilityNet. We're experts in all things to do with technology, high and low, and all areas of disability and impairment. And we don't all fit into neat boxes. So I'm blind, but other people might have other disabilities and sometimes multiple disabilities. And being blind, I may or may not have got my full disability allocation. Something else might come along, like a hearing impairment, for example. So sometimes the technologies have to overlap different disabilities, and some of the more common solutions for a given single disability might not work when there are multiple disabilities. So it's a really complicated area. Voice is hugely empowering. And in the 25 years that I've been working for AbilityNet, I've seen so many changes. When the PC came along in the 80s, everything changed for people with disabilities. Suddenly there were so many choices, so many options. The technical term is redundancy. If you can't see the screen, then you can use speech output like I do. If you can't use a pointer on the screen, can't see a mouse arrow, then you can use a keyboard and keyboard alternatives, hotkeys, and that's a very efficient way of driving your computer, by the way. If you can't use a standard keyboard, there's 100 or 1,000 different choices, ditto with the mouse. So I think that you'll agree that technology is a huge leveler, and that's been hugely, hugely empowering for our stakeholders over the decades since technology came along. And then around a decade or so ago, the smartphone hit the scene big time, and all of the power of those computers are now with you wherever you are. And as we heard the previous speaker talking about, you've now got lots of other sensors in there. And when your own senses don't work, like my eyes don't work, having a camera there with you all the time with some machine learning, I nearly said AI, but there is a definite distinction there. But, we're definitely bordering on real AI being able to be leveraged in the consumer space for people with disabilities. But certainly I use machine learning, and I probably use my camera to recognize text, objects, images, faces, etc., even more than you guys maybe use your camera on a daily basis, unless you're really addicted to taking selfies, for example. So what I talked about in my chapter was this background of technology and how hugely empowering it is. The rise of voice, how it came from being a really specialized thing that was an expensive add-on. You had to have a powerful machine, you had to do lots of training, you had to have the right environment, the right microphone, etc., right through to today, when it can be used on every single device that you own. It can be used in a range of different environments. It's user independent, so you don't have to train it for hours or inject lots of your own documents so that it can learn your word patterns, your vocabulary, etc. So that's the context. And speech output has become really, really user-friendly as well now. So I use Ava, which is I wish I could show you what she sounds like. I use her on my Mac, on my iPad, on my iPhone, on my watch. So, we've got a really nice environment when it comes to speech in, speech out. So the scene is really set for voice-first technologies to take the stage. Very briefly as well, specialist devices. So as a blind person, I used to have to carry around a backpack of equipment, a talking note taker, talking GPS, talking barcode scanner, talking MP3 player, so many different things. All of those are now replaced with my iPhone and various apps, either mainstream or specialist, but at an absolute fraction of the price. And voice has really played a huge part in this because you can drive a lot of that functionality by voice. My sister has, as well as being blind, because our whole family are, she also has MS, multiple sclerosis. So she can talk, but the only thing she can move is her head. And she has a POSSUM, which is an environmental control system, and that costs £8,000. I guess that's about $15,000. And all she can do is bump a button with her head, and that talks down through some self-voicing menus. And there's a lot that it can do, to control her environment, including the TV, the lights, etc. But it's so cumbersome that it takes whole minutes to listen down through the menu items to get to the one, for example, to do something to her TV, and then to go down through the submenu items on her TV for changing the channel, changing the volume, etc. So it can literally take her whole minutes to change the volume or the channel on her television. And now all of that's been replaced with an Echo and a Harmony Hub, and less than £100. And now she's got a solution that not only controls everything in her environment, but also gives her access to everything that the Echo has to offer as well. If I accidentally call her the A lady, then that's because there's one right here. There's at least one in every room in our house. And I do a daily podcast all about the Echo. And so it's ingrained not to say her name. So yeah, that's the kind of context that we're talking about here. It's hugely empowering. And for people with disabilities, the optimal IO is the most natural and most simple one. So even though technology in the 80s was hugely empowering, it was a tough ask. It had a huge hurdle or kind of entry level when it came to technical capabilities. And when you've got an assistive technology layered on top, then it really does become a challenge sometimes. And the desktop screen has got a whole lot of information on it. Come the cell phone, the mobile phone, and developers and copywriters had to apply a lot more discipline because it's a much smaller environment, much less screen real estate. And so that helped everyone because the UIs were much more simplified, distilled down, and the bar, the threshold for being able to use those devices successfully, regardless of your age or impairment or technical ability, confidence, really was lowered a lot. But then we now have the third age, the age of ambient computing, of voice-first technologies being ubiquitous. And what is a more simple UI, a more natural UI than just natural language and speech output? And that's what we're seeing. Yes, some speakers do have screens and they're leveraged really well, but many don't. And this natural language ability to just talk to the air, and hopefully as things go forward, and as I discuss a little bit in my chapter, that will become more and more ubiquitous. It will be wearing on your body, it will be embedded in the environment. You probably won't even know or care where the answer is coming from. It'll just be piped directly into your ears or maybe even to your brain. I would ask you to look up a brilliant article called Alter Ego. That's the one word. I'll just leave that one hanging in the air there. But with health applications, obviously people with disabilities, there's a huge prevalence of, these are very heavy consumers of health services, and being able to access confidentially through a voice-first interface your doctor's, your own, medical records, etc., or dental records would be absolutely brilliant. Voice print technologies would enable them to be securely accessed by you alone. And if you need to add on a second level of authentication there as well, like a spoken PIN, for example, then that would give that extra level of security. Here in the UK, the NHS, the National Health Service, has recently provided or collaborated with Amazon to provide all of their information that is on a current service that is accessed either online or through 111. So 999 is the emergency number here in the UK. If it's not an emergency of a medical nature, you can call 111. And then the people there basically tap away on a massive database of the NHS's expert knowledge as to what the symptoms are, what the remedies, what the particular things that you might want to do about that, particular symptoms that you've got. It could be go straight to the hospital, for example, are now all embedded in the Echo. So that collaboration means that you don't have to invoke a third-party skill. You can just ask anything that is found in that database, and that will be able to be accessed for you, without having to touch a button or pick up the phone or wait in a queue, for example, online. So there's another collaboration recently. The RNIB, the Royal National Institute of the Blind here in the UK, have done something similar with Amazon, whereby you don't have to enable a skill. It's now first party, where you can ask a lot of information about vision impairment, medical conditions to do with that, how you become registered blind or partially sighted, how you can go to your local ophthalmologist, etc. So that's really, really powerful information. Obviously, Wikipedia, Recipedia, WikiHow, all of those are examples of third-party functionality that has been brought in-house over the months and years. And that's definitely the way to go, whereby third-party skills, as useful as they are, will become more and more native functionality. And Amazon definitely have their eye, and I'm sure Google do too, on that blossoming ecosphere, environment of third-party functionality, and are actively looking at bringing those into the, in-house. So it's a really, really exciting time. That's a little bit about what my chapter's about. There's a lot more in there, and I've got no idea how we're doing for time, but yeah.
No, that's great.
You're at
That's
time.
it. Thank you.
We did very well.
Perfect.
And if there's a way for you to do it, we can continue to go in the chat window as well too, if that's proving accessible enough.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
It's a very busy screen.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Sure.
So
I'll do my best.
yeah, thank you so much
All
too.
right.
And it's great
Robin,
to have living proof of these, that it comes into your life every single day too. So that's been really important.